podcast of the year, and we've officially changed our title to All Things Recon. So we've invited everybody across both of the recon tools we have at Velo because we're going to be discussing things that are not exclusive to either tool.
But yeah, one of the things we wanted to cover today too is, I guess, Josh, what we're kind of talking a little bit before this, and what we wanted to do is, coverage and things to consider when if you're going to do a full court press towards doing well at recon in your dealership, what do you leverage within your dealership in conjunction with the tool, right, to put as many sets of eyes on doing recon well as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And really, how do you maximize the value of the investment that you're making with the tools like Rapid Recon and Velocity, and also the time that your people spend with it?
Yep, that is very true.
So this is kind of a basic concept, and really, honestly, this started coming together for me in the last year doing the Drive to Five program. It's always been something that's been important in implementing Rapid Recon and Velocity. Having the right people in place, having the process mapped out correctly. But in the last year or so, tutoring some of our newer clients, newer customers, and kind of seeing how do people adjust to the tool when they first launch. I've seen how important it is to actually define this concept and to understand it as being vital. And so that's when I landed on the idea of coverage. And it's a term that everybody uses, but I think it has a more specific meaning for us, which is, how are your people actually interacting with your organizational tools, whether that be something like Rapid Recon or Velocity, or if that's just a spreadsheet. And so, the people on this call, assuming most of the people we have with us today are our customers, but some of them, may not be, and they may be using other tools. What matters at the end of the day is that your teammates are participating and that you have a standard for what you expect them to do and accomplish when they're utilizing these tools.
Yeah, and granted too, let's keep in mind too, in some of the dialogue that we're going to have too, is in addition to the tool, right? The tool is great. The tool is what kind of binds everything together. It fills in the cracks in the communication. It adds transparency for everybody involved in the recon process, especially when you're trying to uptick the efficiency and the effectiveness of your process, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. So with that being said, I think what we'd like to do is just sort of go through a little presentation. We'll have some dialogue about our experiences. And then if anyone would like to contribute to the discussion, talking about, how do you keep track of your reconditioning process? Do you have specific vital personnel in place that are helping you with that? How do you incorporate people that may not be a part of your dealership staff that aren't directly supervised by you, like your vendors or your detailers, if that's somebody who's working through you in a third party capacity? Uh, so we'd love to hear back from you, get feedback, because part of the series is not just, a presentation on our part for best practices in recon, but we also want to hear from you guys. What are your experiences been like, and how can we help and facilitate, the development of your recon process? So
Yeah, please raise your hand, guys. This is if you got something that you do in particular in your dealership that you can contribute, some great ideas or anything to add to the discussion. This is an open forum for this type of thing, and we welcome any and all input and feedback. So.
Absolutely. But pushing on here, let's talk about some of the concepts defining coverage. So we already talked a little bit about this, but this is something, like I said, this is something that became crystallized in my mind most recently. Before, we never really talked explicitly about this, but I would really like to, in the future, make this sort of something that we define early on for our customers. But this is the idea of coverage is how well does your recon tool actually map to your process? And then the other side of it is, do you have the right individuals in place to monitor those processes, to monitor those parts of your process, and make sure that they are responsible for and accountable to the amount of time that each unit takes in that part of the process in their step? So we have some example workflows down here below. This is just, a clip from other people's, from Rapid and Velocity. And so if you're looking at your workflow, if you see your version of this, you want to have specific individuals in place who are going to apply, who are going to be applicable in the context of the given step. So, for instance, here we see a parts estimate step. I would want to have my parts department directly overseeing that step. I don't want to have my service advisor or my internal writer update that information secondhand when they hear about it. I'd rather get that information straight from the horse's mouth. And so that's just one example. You can see in each of the steps here in the workflow, there's a specific part of the process that's defined, like advisor review. Obviously, in that step, we want to have the advisor in charge. But when you look at your workflow, when you look at how you're set up organizationally, you should always keep in the back of your mind who's going to be ultimately responsible for that step in my workflow. Because if no one's in charge of a given step, it's very likely that units will stop there, they'll be delayed there, they'll be bottlenecked there, and that they'll make it seem like we've accumulated time in a part of our process where they really haven't. Do you have any insights there, Bobby?
Yeah, it is hot potato when you get a car into the recon process. And, our tools are designed around not only just transparency, but, accountability, the transfer of accountability. And, when I say accountability, it's not like our tool is designed to micromanage anything. If anything, it eliminates the finger pointing, right? We get a lot of finger pointing. The managers come guns ablazing looking for their cars because they think they took too long, and what the hell happened, right? Or why is it taking 12 days to get these cars done? So yeah, everybody who's, we have a step. If we have a step in the workflow, that means we can measure it, right? And depending on what you do in the dealership, you're responsible for certain parts of the workflow, and be cognizant of the fact that the reporting will reflect how many cars went through that step over a given period of time. In addition to that, how long on average cars spent in that step. So,
Yeah, and whether you're using Velocity or Rapid, those reporting tools are available to determine how are units moving through the system overall. Um, and as we move through here, we'll be able to talk about, implementing systems that you can put in place to make these things a no-brainer. So when we talk about, this is not about micromanagement, we really mean that, because when you actually have that coverage in place, when you have individuals who are accountable to those steps and who are responsible for the amount of time that units take in those steps, it's like they're each supervising themselves in some way, and the system reports back to them how long a unit is taking, so they can see the progress of their own work. And so when each person takes that individual responsibility, the whole process is covered. The whole process becomes more accountable, more transparent to the team, just because those individuals are in place. So it really is sort of more of a set and forget thing. There are just a few supervisory things you have to do, but if you have good coverage, you really unlock a lot of value from tools like ours. I wanted to briefly mention, just as an example, before we talk about some of the positive things you can do, just an example of what bad coverage looks like, or what that would entail.
and we've seen it.
And we have seen it, yeah, we have seen it a number of times, and it's probably one of the first things we do in a dealership is start sorting out these issues of bad coverage. But in a dealership with bad coverage using Rapid Recon or Velocity, they're going to have one or two individuals who are managing the entire workflow. So we're going to have maybe the service advisor or internal writer or used car manager who is just in charge of hearing back from different members of the team and updating the status of units in the workflow as they hear back. And there are also going to be significant gaps in the process. So for instance, we have some dealers who they have a great process mapped out for their service staff, and everyone's using the technology correctly there, and everything's documented and passing through the system well. But then it gets to the detail department and there's no participation. So cars just sit there in detail for an extra 3 or 4 days, and the recon manager is wondering, how can I improve my times when I've got my shop all in order, but nothing is reciprocated on the behalf of other departments.
And
So
Josh, if I can jump in, that
yeah,
that brings to light some things. You talk to dealerships all the time. Oh, the detail department. It's like, come on, it's not, our tool is not rocket science. It's one of the easiest. You can't tell me your detail department isn't otherwise on a cell phone anyway, doing whatever, right? This day and age, gone are the, there's, do not fall short with not thinking that your detail department is not capable, right? Spanish speaking, I don't care. How many times, Josh, if, oh, good luck with detail, we've been in dealerships, right? And we go back to detail and, whatever the case is, holy, oh yeah, no problem. They get it up on their phones. And wouldn't it be nice, if they're accountable for an important part of your workflow, they're important. You can't just, oh, details, detail. They're the catch-all and it's always detail's fault. So, and I say that because one of the best ways to sell the concept of using a tool to do recon well to the detail department is it eliminates the finger pointing. It keeps the monkey off your back. If you are the problem, it's going to show you're the problem, right? And if you're not, you're not. So here's an opportunity to not be the problem, right? And then keep everybody off your back. Josh, we talked earlier about even just lot porters, right? People who are responsible for keeping the inventory tight, making sure the cars are lined up, taking a car that's done, staging it, whether they're putting the final buyer's guides and stuff on the cars before they put them out front, loop them in. Okay. Nobody, vendors, right? I don't know if I'm stealing your thunder a little bit, Josh, but vendors too, just because they don't work for you, but they're important to your work process, get them involved.
Yeah.
When you get all these people involved with it and you get more eyes on it, what I find that dealerships are often surprised at the autonomy, things start to happen by themselves, right?
Yes, exactly.
You mentioned that one guy in the dealership that's managing it. Well, he's managing the entire tool. It's probably the internal writer, the recon manager, right? The guy who everybody, you might as well just put special victims unit on their office door because everybody and their brother's coming. Oh, I need this car. Oh, I got, where's this car? Da, da, da. Okay, well, cool. We have a tool that avoids all that. Just look in the tool. But that internal recon manager, that internal visor cannot be on an island of his own. Disperse the technology, and loop everybody in and sit back. And yeah, he might be responsible for raising the red flag when there's a bottleneck or when there's something going on, but he should not be the beat up guy, the guy that gets beat up when something doesn't go right. So of course, sometimes they want to take ownership. They want to steer the whole thing. Get other people involved. You'll be amazed at how autonomous your workflow starts to flow when you got the right people in the work in the tool with the transparency and the ability to affect it.
Yeah, 100%. I want to reiterate that too. Just more often than not, the vendors and detailers want to be on a tool like this because it's easier for them to organize their work that way. Oftentimes, they work with multiple dealerships and they've got everything written down in a single notebook, and it's a real pain to organize. So it's cool when they can show up to a dealer, pull out a single app, and figure out what they're doing that day. But then with your detailers, any other third parties or otherwise, like auxiliary staff that nonetheless are important to the process, they want to be on the tool because it allows them to demonstrate their value to the organization. And once again, like Bobby said, it eliminates that finger pointing. And so a lot of detailers that are confident in their work, that know they do a good job, they're going to be happy to be on the tool. And training is not an issue. We our team provides a lot of resources to get your people up online. And even for vendors, we have an entire vendor certification program. So we have a whole method from their perspective on how to train them on these tools. So when it comes to getting people to participate, you're not alone. We're not just advising you on how to improve the overall utilization of the tool. We're here to help you as well. So just get in contact with your customer success manager. You should know who that is, and they will direct you to the right people in the case that you need additional training for your staff or for third-party vendors.
And if you
But
don't know who that is, I'm sure, Josh, if they go up in their corner and go and send an email to support, hey, I need some help or some training, it's going to happen. Because
yeah,
unlike some other
exactly.
companies, you're not going to end up in India or somewhere else where in a call center that your call is going to be handled or by someone that knows the tool and is an expert. So.
Yeah, and we have a team that is familiar with each other, that we know the expertise that everyone brings. So when you reach out to support, you're reaching out to a human being, and that human being has other people in mind that they know what they can bring to the table to meet your needs, whatever that might be. So anyway, just I can't reiterate this enough. Just be communicative with us, and we'll help the tool work for you, whatever tools you're using. But now let's move on to good coverage. Good coverage, I think, is what we really want to focus on here. But it's good to know kind of what we're trying to avoid in the first place. But with good coverage, you're going to have each distinct part of your process accounted for. So, as you move from one department to the next, as you require new action on the car, whether that's doing an inspection, whether that's pricing out the inspection or the estimate, or approving the estimate, you want to have a step for each of those parts of your process. So, for instance, sometimes you'll see workflows where it's incoming or purchase in transit, and then right below it, it's just shop and then detail and then finished. Well, how much insight do we really have into your process? If that's all the steps that we're considering for the workflow. We know the car's in the shop. We don't know if it's been inspected. We don't know what kind of work's going to be required. We don't know when the parts are going to arrive, but we know it's in the shop. That's not going to be good enough. We need to have at least some fidelity into the finer workings of the process to know, are we inspecting the cars fast enough? Are we getting the parts orders in before our parts cutoffs times? Are we being communicative? I'm sure you have a lot to add here, Bobby.
Yeah, you see me chomping at the bit.
Yeah.
No, but get to that. There's no such thing as a too long workflow, right? Everybody wants to keep the least amount of steps as possible. We used to think that too. When we
We
first
did.
started, we invented we came up with the product, right? And it's like, oh, well, let's keep it super simple. And then, yeah, I'm sorry, but moving car from one step to the next is not everybody's problem. That's an easy thing to do. That's the easy part of our tool, right? So yeah, I talked to Storian this past week. I had a review and he just had, like you said, Josh, inspection. And then he at least had repair, right?
Right.
Or the car's in the shop. Great. Who do I talk to? Well, special victims unit above your door. They're coming to that guy, that internal writer. What the hell? They still don't know, right? So why not put Jeff, Chris, Tim, and Billy Bob in your workflow? And now not only do you know the car's in the shop, you know who it's with, right?
Yeah.
Because and it's just more longer workflow is just better drill down as to exactly what's going on with your cars. And if you're that internal writer guy who's got to play whack-a-mole and answer everybody's questions, let the tool work for you a little bit. And I was talking to a GM. I was on a call, and he's very involved in his recon process. And I said, if there's a step for it, then now you can measure people as individuals, right? And again, it's the transfer of accountability. Okay, it's great that it's in the shop. Who's it with? And then furthermore, Josh, you could put Jeff, Tim, Billy, Bob inspecting, right? And then you got your approval, needs approval. And then whatever names I just said, Billy, Bob, Tim, repair. Okay, so now not only do you know who it's with, you know what phase the car's in when it's in the shop. It does still need to be inspected, or is it being finished out? That's some good information, especially me as a salesperson or a BDC who's got a lead on a car that it took in 3 days ago. I know damn well the car's not sitting out front yet. I would like to know, have we even looked at it yet? Oh, it's been approved. Oh, good news. They're doing brakes, an alignment, a battery, and 4 tires. Great. Guess what I'm going to share with my customer? Hey, good news. You know, hey, it's still in the shop. It should be done by tomorrow, but hey, good news is we're putting new tires on it, new brakes, an alignment, and a battery. Can you come in, Friday? It really helps your to better handle your customers, because back when I sold cars, there's quite a few times a customer came in on a car that they knew we had, and sure enough, you finally find the car and it's up on a lift in the shop, and the customer drove 35, 40 miles to drive the car. Right. So that's, so, but yes, good coverage. I didn't mean to get lengthy with my little spiel, but I'm passionate about it. And feel free, guys, if there's steps that are worthy of adding transparency to where the hell is my car, let's get it in there. Measuring people's individuals. Not only is it organizational, it can kind of be a dispatch for that internal writer. Oh, at a glance, I can see Billy Bob's got 4 cars. He's got 2 cars he needs inspected. He's finishing out 1 car. Great. Look at Jim doesn't have anything. I'm just going to move the car to Jim's step, and Jim's going to get a ping on his phone or his computer saying that he was just given a car. So there's ways you can set up the tool to work better for you.
Yeah, exactly. And uh, with having that insight into your process, breaking out your process into steps for, like, let's say inspection and parts pricing and finalizing the estimate. For some dealers, that seems like a bridge too far, like we're going too deeply. But when we really want to get into the nitty gritty with a dealer and we want to start improving their times, one of the first things we look at is how are you inspecting the vehicles? What does that process look like? How fast do you get into the shop? How consistent is that process? Who's doing the inspecting? That's the first thing we look at. So if we don't have any insight into that, if we don't have that process, uh, you stepped out, put in the distinct steps right in front of us, we'll never have that insight to figure out what's actually happening. And so you're exactly what you're saying, Bobby, is you can only measure what you actually have steps for. And so that's I think the
Yep.
bottom line there.
And I love, if you can't measure it, you can't grow it, right? You can't grow it, you can't improve it. You can't measure it.
100%.
So,
Um, so that's the important aspect of coverage, is having those steps in place in the first place. And then of course you should have a specific individual in mind for each of the steps in your workflow. And so this is an important point. I don't mean a unique individual in mind for each unique step. I just mean you need to have somebody in mind who's responsible for every step in your workflow. So for instance, for a lot of our customers, they have 3 steps right at the beginning of their workflow: incoming, in transit, trade hold, and some other, incoming category usually. The sales managers or sales used car manager, sales management team, they are as a whole responsible for those first 3 steps. And that's how you should be able to see your entire workflow. Every step should have somebody who's immediately responsible to it. Even those one-off steps where it's like sales took keys or um, awaiting dispatch, those steps should also have, if not, a unique individual, somebody who's responsible for it. And so that way nothing ever gets lost and everybody is accountable for the cars in the process. So for instance, if a unit moves to sales took keys, it doesn't just sit there for days and days and
guess
days.
whose problem that is? That's the sales manager's problem. Who took the
Exactly.
keys and installed this car and kept it from going through the process? So I'm with you.
Yeah, exactly. And so we should have, when we think about that, we can also have notifications go out to those persons, just as you mentioned, Bobby, so that we can make sure that as a unit transitions from one step to the other, everyone's on top of it and is notified. And then the final aspect of good coverage, I would say, and this is what we look at whenever we're assessing a system. I'd say, Bobby, one of the first things you look at, right, when you look at a new tool, if you're doing a performance review or a
Hmm.
consultation, is notes, right? You look at note taking,
Yeah.
documentation, photos. What does the inspection look like?
Hmm.
So that's sort of the last thing that you need to lock in. Once you have the your coverage laid out in your tool, whether that's rapid or velocity, you have your steps laid out and it's mapped correctly to your process. Then when you have the right people in place and you have the notifications set up for them, the last thing that you really need to maintain is just keeping up that standard of documentation, making sure that, if we expect the RO number to be in the notes, it's there every time. If we expect the inspection to be laid out and priced out correctly with pictures, it's there every time. That way we set a standard for the process that can be consistent going forward. And once we have those things in place, like you said, Bobby, things just start working out, and they start working out in a big way without us having to think about it too much.
Yeah, and the detail that you're putting in, and make good use of the notes, the pictures. Not only is it making you more efficient because the information's there, it's also cover your ass, right? Um, you know, car comes back 2 weeks after it's sold, something's wrong. Boom, who's gonna be? What's everybody's? It's that whole finger pointing thing. So CYA, cover your ass, document, things that are necessary, but also for the purpose of keeping your process running smooth and, information for the people downstream that have to handle the car accordingly.
100%. And that's pretty much what we talked. Everything we just talked about there is covered here in this slide of the presentation. But one thing I want to mention is also the way that the goal times work. We have a color trigger warning system in rapid and velocity. And in both of those tools, if a unit spends too long in a given step, it'll go from its normal state into a cautionary state. It'll enter a column where it's divided from the rest of the units and labeled as a caution. And then it'll move into the red state or the danger state, indicating it's been too long in its step. So everybody who's on this call should be able to should be familiar with units that move into those color trigger warning states. And that having those goal times locked in to a realistic expectation is another way that you can really get good coverage and good utilization out of your time with Rapid. Because individuals who are responsible for those steps, when they see the cars transition from yellow and then into red, it gives them a sense of urgency. It lets them know, hey, this unit that you're responsible for right now is going over its time. And that's how the hot potato game gets started. And that's how we keep everybody in the system aware of the sense of urgency that we have behind every car. Because we know every day that passes, we're going to make less money ultimately. Um, so the last thing I want to talk about before we adjourn here, and I really would like, we haven't had anyone raise their hands. We've got kind of a slim attendance here. I do appreciate everyone that did come. I hope you've learned a few things here, and maybe you can have some takeaways for the next your next ventures here with Rapid or with Velocity.
Yeah, or even if there's a topic you want us to research and discuss on our next podcast, we'd be happy to dive in. So
Yeah, absolutely. We're always looking for more things to cover, and we've got a lot of topics. We got a lot of things that we could discuss, but I really want to be able to make this an opportunity for our customers to learn more as well.
mm.
But the last thing to do, once you have everything in place for coverage, you have your people trained up, you got your process mapped out, everything's documented the way you like. You just want to maintain that. How do you maintain it? How do you keep your people consistent? Well, one thing we recommend is you have meetings. You have a weekly or bi-monthly meeting with your recon staff, particularly with the leadership. You want to have your recon champion or your recon manager, your service manager, your GSM, your used car manager, all in a room together to discuss what's going on with your tool, what's going on with recon in general. That's a really nice practice I've seen across the country. I know you have too, Bobby.
Hmm.
Some of our best and most well-organized dealers have regular meetings where they have the tool up in the background and they actively
Yep.
discuss, hey, what's going on with our process? Do we have,
I've even
go ahead.
seen, yeah, I've even seen 10-minute stand-up meetings daily. Come on in, let's talk. What's going on? Why do we know? And then boom, it's just top of the head awareness of everything that's going on. Okay, it's not the end of the world that this car's red and it's sitting in some step. We know we're waiting on a transmission from LKQ or something like that, right? It's kind of like your kid having a fever. It's not the end of the world, but you want to know why, right? And
Exactly.
so that's what it drives the conversation around it. So.
Yeah, and hone in on those units in danger. Figure it out together as a team. What's going on with this car? Do we have the proper documentation in place uh, to to uh, to understand the problem with it? And then what's our team going to do to address that issue? And when you have that discussion as a team, when you actively overcome these issues as a team, people they begin to understand before these issues become a problem how to fix things ahead of time. So there's the 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 contribution that this can make towards gelling your team together. Um, it can't be overstated when you have these regular meetings because it allows you guys to work together as a team to overcome uh, issues as they happen. And it's a real nice opportunity to build good
A
rapport.
culture, build a culture around it at the end.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Josh, a little bit of segue, and if, granted, we kind of went over importance of the coverage, right? Two things I love to reiterate constantly. There's two things to do well. Okay. Managers or whoever starts the process, start on day zero, right? If a car is here ready to go and the keys are here or in service or the packets, get the car into the damn shop, right? Let's move the cars out of the incoming steps into the shop. Two places I look, Josh. The first thing I look at the notes, I look at pictures and usage, but I want to know two places they should not suck at. Okay. I'm just going to be straightforward. Do not suck at starting on day zero. Do not suck at approving work in a timely fashion. Okay. Those are my two, what I call behavior. Those are the intent to do recon well, right? Recon usually doesn't go poorly because anybody is slow or anybody sucks. Recon typically goes, due to lack of communication, or due to just there's a breakdown somewhere. Well, let's get the cars into the damn shop. Somebody up there, if it's done, if it's not here yet, put it in transit. If it's trade hold, put it on trade hold. Otherwise, let's get the RO written or get it. I know a lot of stores are getting pictured up, your pre-photos and before the shop. You need to make sure you're fast at that and then approve work in a timely fashion. If those two things are aligned, then it's just bottleneck management. Right.
And that's one of the main things that I communicate to our sales managers and used car managers is that you are the person who engenders the sense of urgency in the whole process. If you're the one keeping up with the your inventory, if you're pushing the units on day zero, if you're attending to those approvals in a timely manner, that is what is going to inform everyone else in the process's sense of urgency, is that whether you take your inventory seriously or not. And I've been thinking about this recently is, just as an experiment, what if you're a used car manager, if you're a GSM, what if one day you just sat in one of the cars you were waiting to get inspected that day? You just sat in it and saw how long it took for a technician to finally bring that car into the shop.
It's a good
And
point.
that's how all your people should imagine each of these used cars. It should be just as urgent to them as all of the units out on the service drive. They should imagine that you're sitting out in that car and that you can't eat lunch until they've gotten the inspection done. You can't come out of it until it's been through the shop. Um, and really, leaders have a very important role to play in the daily operation and just making sure that they hold to their very small, slim commitments. Right. One is just making sure that units, when they arrive, you push them into the process. You give people some insight into what your plan is for the car and you push it through. And the next thing is getting those approvals done quickly. And if you do those two things, which isn't hard to do, which is something you got to maintain as a discipline, if you do those two things, you will help everyone in your process get more urgent, get more accountable to what's going on.
100% agree. And, I forgot the point that I was going to make, but, with those two things aligned, make sure your people that actually, the people in your dealership that actually make recon happen, your technicians, your downstream people, make sure they know why you want your cars yesterday, right? The theory of velocity and turn, that's a 5-minute conversation, Josh, with managers. Sales managers, they get the science of velocity and turn all day long. Average age of inventory divided into the year, you get, your and then how much that's costing you if you shift, how much faster you're getting the cars out front, right? It becomes a $1 million business if you can just cut your recon time in half. Make sure your downstream people know why you want your cars yesterday, not just that you're impatient sales managers, right? If you can educate your people and they know the why, things will just start happening by themselves, right? And that's part of building the culture around doing recon well. So
Absolutely. Well, I think we have reached our time here, Bobby.
awesome.
But
I'm
uh,
fired up. I want to keep going, but I
I,
can't.
I know.
Well, I'll save it for the next podcast.
Yeah, we might even continue this topic into another podcast or evolve it from there.
Mhm.
But once again want to thank those that have joined us to learn more, and I hope that you'll share this podcast when you see it again with the rest of the folks who you think might benefit from taking part. And of course, we'd love to hear from you guys in the future. But this has been great, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. See you again soon.